Okay, so we're back out here in this area between Nipigon and Red Rock for a very special episode. We are just north of milepost 131 on the Kinghorn line. So milepost 81.3 on the original Canadian Northern and later initial Canadian national lines. You can see sort of the geography of this area. So we're right alongside Nipigon Bay here, which is just to the east, just to my left through the trees. And the reason why we're here is we're filming a very special episode at this very unique location. You can see beside us we have the still active Canadian Pacific mainline. I guess officially now the Canadian Pacific Kansas City mainline. So going to be the Canadian Pacific to me. This is their Nipigon subdivision, which runs between Scriber and Thunder Bay. So the reason why we're here and the reason why we're taking a look at this location is because since the last time we were here, so right now it is June of 2023. We were last here in June of 2021 filming the episode through this area. There's been some new information that has come to light, and so there was unfortunately a very, very tragic accident that took place, I believe, right in this area here. I don't have the exact information of where the accident took place, but this is the most logical location. So the accident took place in November of 1911. So construction on this line had just begun by Canadian Northern, and this was actually one of the most challenging areas that they would have to build through. And obviously one of the big reasons is you can see the geography here, but geography played another big role. So as you hear me mention a lot of times when I do the sort of intro to the episode, I talk a little bit about the fact that Canadian Northern did not want to build through this area here. You can see the trees open up, and you can see Nipigon Bay, nice little breeze, keeping the mosquitoes are just horrific today. So Canadian Northern didn't want to build between this area. And so one of the areas that they looked at trying to make an arrangement was between the then city of Port Arthur, which is now Thunder Bay, and here in Nipigon. And the reason why was the Canadian Pacific already had a line through the area. So Canadian Northern was trying to get a running rights agreement with Canadian Pacific so they could basically utilize the same tracks. Unfortunately, any type of negotiations, any type of agreement, they just couldn't figure something out for a whole bunch of reasons. So what ended up happening was Canadian Northern had to build, and this was going to be one of the very challenging areas because there was no way to get from Red Rock to Nipigon in sort of an efficient manner. And so what they ended up doing was having to basically run their line parallel to the Canadian Pacific from Red Rock, which is just to the south of us, all the way to Nipigon, which is to the north of us. And this is what they ended up having to do. So you have this stretch here where you have these massive, massive cliffs. And so all along this stretch, and I can't remember exactly how many miles it is. Nipigon is at milepost 78. So about 4 miles. Basically, the two lines parallel each other, and the Canadian Pacific had been built through this area earlier. So the Canadian Pacific line was run through here 1884, 1885. So Canadian Northern had to basically run their line outboard of the Canadian Pacific line, and that presented a whole bunch of challenges, right? Because it was difficult for Canadian Pacific to build through here because they're basically skirting the lakeshore, and Canadian Pacific had to do a whole bunch of blasting. Now Canadian Northern basically has to do the same thing, but they have to build outboard. So this entire grade, pretty much right from Red Rock all the way here, this is all fill. right? So this is all material that's been dumped in here to create this grade outboard of the Canadian Pacific line. And maybe what I'll do is I'll show you a couple of maps here, and essentially you can kind of see what I'm sort of referring to in terms of the geography of the area. Okay, so again, let's flash back to November of 1911. So it's reported in newspapers, and I will flash up this newspaper article for you. Basically that there is work underway to construct this portion of the line, and the article is not very specific about the location, but again, I'm kind of guessing that this is where it is, because you can see we're kind of rounding a corner here. There's a very sort of tight bend in the track. You can see that there's a very, very high cliff here. And this would be particularly challenging to sort of build in the area. So basically what's happening is Canadian Pacific workers are blasting rock out of here, and then they're using that rock to help sort of infill where the Canadian Northern grade is going to go. But at the same time, you have an active rail line, and so you basically have trains kind of going back and forth. And so where the tragedy takes place is essentially you have a Canadian Pacific train, and I can't remember the direction. They mentioned in the article. I'll flash it up on the screen. But basically there's a Canadian Pacific train that's running through the area, and the workers are blasting and they're working and they're shifting the material over here. And unfortunately, I believe it's an express, so it's probably like a passenger train. It's traveling very, very quickly. So the workers don't have time to basically get themselves out of the way as the train is approaching. And because of the nature of the construction, the only place the workers can go is basically right up against the side of the rock cut. And of course the train is zooming by right in front of them. So unfortunately, there were a couple of workers, and it does mention the nationality of them. So it does mention that were Italians. They were not able to get out of the way, and essentially they were struck by the train, and obviously probably killed instantly. And so it was one of the earliest tragedies on this line, and there were a number of them. When you basically take a look at construction of any railway line, there's going to be a whole bunch of accidents that take place. It was a very dangerous type of work, and there were a number of fatalities building this particular piece of line. And I'm sure there were accidents that occurred when Canadian Pacific was building their stretch of line way back in the 80s, right? So again, a very, very unfortunate sort of circumstance, and just kind of talks to you a little bit about the challenges of sort of building through this type of area, and you know, the immense amount of work that went into the construction, and the effort that was put in by you know, by the workers, right, to build this. And again, you can kind of see the nature of the area here. You can actually see that in this rock face here is actually overhanging a little bit. I can see they've basically put in reinforcing bolts into the rock face, basically to try to keep the rock in. You can see actually some rock fall that's happened here. You can see the fencing that's basically used to keep rocks off the track. These things here, they're actually rock fall detection equipment, right? So basically there's a series of wires that stretch across, right? They look like sort of telegraph poles, but they're detection equipments, right? So if something falls and basically snaps one of the wires or hits one of the wires, they'll essentially know that something has fallen down onto the tracks. Okay, so hopefully you've enjoyed this little sort of extra piece of video that we've sort of injected into the series here. Again, there's always going to be little sort of pieces of history that sort of come to light, and hopefully it adds to the understanding of what transpired here and sort of the construction of the line. So essentially you're going to continue on with the episodes, working down the grade all the way down to Red Rock, which is sort of visible down over there in the distance. I don't know if you can see that in the camera. But anyway, enjoy the rest of the episode.